In a single broadside exchange, a dozen boys no older than 8 were shredded between the gun decks. This is how the Golden Age of Piracy quietly bled its youngest crew, one powder charge at a time. Picture a gun deck at first light. Smoke has not yet cleared from the night's brutal drill. The timbers still smell of tar, sweat, and old blood. The deck itself remembers every brutal battle. A boy of 7 runs low along the boards, arms wrapped around a cartridge heavier than his ribs. He does not look up, and he does not speak. Silence is the powder monkey's only shield. A single spark, a single stumble, and the hold beneath him opens like a hungry, devouring mouth. The men above him sail proudly under the black flag. Later, the songs will call them free. But before that myth is ever sung, meet the forgotten child who quietly lit the killing fuse. The Golden Age of Piracy stretched roughly from 1650 to 1730, 80 long, brutal years. 80 long years of black sails, torn charts, salt-crusted rope, and a fortune favoring only the ruthless. Its cruel stage stretched from the Caribbean and Atlantic Americas to the slave routes of West Africa, and the blood-soaked ports of Port Royal, Tortuga, Nassau, and Madagascar's remote Ile Sainte-Marie. Lawless harbors all. In those crowded harbors, gold changed hands faster than gospel, and rum flowed cheaper than fresh water. Governors looked the other way when the price was right, and hanged men in chains when it was not. Beneath the romance sat a far colder machine. Piracy was cannon warfare, and cannon warfare was economy. A single well-served gun crew could break a merchantman in an hour. One brutal, ruthless, lawless hour. A broken merchantman meant silver, sugar, silks, enslaved human cargo, and letters of credit ripe for forgery. Every captain under the black flag understood this cold, unforgiving arithmetic of powder, iron, and human hands. Powder heavy in the hold, iron in the shot lockers, and enough small hands to serve both weapons. Without those small silent hands below decks, the great iron guns were nothing more than heavy coffins. If you want to know how Blackbeard himself met his end, the next voyage is already waiting. The recruiters walked the docks, the almshouses of Bristol and Plymouth, the orphan yards of Kingston and Charles Town. They walked the workhouses of Boston, where boys were bound out for bread, the ones nobody would miss. A boy with no father was a boy with no ransom, no name in any parish book. He could vanish into a hold and never be missed, swallowed by the black flag before dawn. The black flag was called a social contract. Articles signed, shares voted, wounds paid in pieces of 8. A wounded man might receive 800 pieces of 8 for a lost arm beneath the skull and bones. Freedom, in the songs, meant every hand was equal. Yet every gun deck hid a smaller, silent crew. On the king's ships, they were called powder boys, powder monkeys, or ship's boys of the 3rd class. Under the black flag, they held no rank at all. Only errands between the magazine and the muzzle. The magazine sat deep in the hull, sealed, dark, lined with copper so no iron nail could strike sparks. The guns roared above, red-hot and starving for charge, and between the 2 decks ran a barefoot child. Here is the central paradox. He was far too small to fight, too small to swing a cutlass. He could not haul a yard, nor stand a boarding pike against a grown marine on deck. Yet without him, the guns fell silent within minutes. Without him, the ship was already a hollow wreck. He was the smallest link in the killing chain, and the entire chain broke the moment he did. The Royal Navy formalized the role. Pirates copied it in silence, because the Black Flag could not afford honesty. The nickname stuck for practical reasons. Monkey, because he had to move on all fours through low passages. Monkey, because he had to climb between decks fast. Monkey, because sailors chose the cruelest word available. The average age, from court records and muster rolls, ran 8 to 12. Some 6. A few 5. Their job description reads like a death sentence. Consider his shift. He rose before officers, before dawn's watch. He was handed a leather or canvas cartridge case, sometimes called a salt box, sometimes a budge barrel. Inside sat a measured charge of black powder, wrapped in flannel or serge, waiting patiently for spark. He carried it up 2, 3, sometimes 4 ladders. He kept it away from lantern glass and galley fire. He kept it from the slow match at every gun station, that thin coil of rope soaked in saltpeter. It glowed like a red eye and waited to catch him. He tied wet cloth across his mouth, silently, less to spare his lungs than to spare the powder from his breath. He went barefoot on the deck, because boots made noise, and noise on a gun deck was insubordination. He learned to move behind recoil, never in front. A 2-ton carriage lurching backward on rope tackles would crush a foot to jelly. And keep going. Under the Black Flag, the smallest lives held the deadliest measure of powder and silence. He carried water, too, buckets between the guns, for the sponge that swabbed the barrel between shots. He carried wadding, the twisted hemp that packed the charge tight. Then linstocks, rammers, worms, priming horns. He learned the deadly choreography of a gun crew, 6 or 7 grim men to each piece. The captain of the gun at the breech, the sponge man, the loader, the train tackleman, and the boy, threading between them like a shuttle through a loom, delivering death by the pound, silent and unseen. Spark discipline was absolute. One dropped cartridge near a slow match turned the hold into a furnace. Ships had vanished for less. A single distracted powder monkey could end 200 lives in one flash. The men watched the boys the way a man watches a lit fuse in his own trembling hand. Then the first broadside turned children into targets. Consider what happened aboard when the guns finally spoke. A single 32-pounder discharging in an enclosed wooden deck produced sound pressure near 130 decibels. Broadsides fired in ripple or unison layered that noise upon itself until the deck rang like a bell. Adult sailors went deaf. Children went deaf faster and never recovered their hearing beneath the Black Flag. The smoke was worse. Black powder combustion filled the deck with a dense, acrid, sulphurous, choking fog. Vision collapsed to barely 2 feet, sometimes less. Lanterns became halos. Men shouted commands nobody could hear. The powder monkeys navigated by memory, hand along beam, foot along seam, counting steps between ladder and gun. Miscount once, they walked into a recoiling carriage. Miscount twice, they walked through a shot hole into water. Splinters killed more men on the wooden warship than iron did, and the powder boys stood closest. When a solid shot struck the hull, it drove a storm of oak fragments inward at musket velocity. Splinters the length of a forearm, splinters the width of a nail, tearing through flesh and bone alike. A grown man might survive a leg wound with a tourniquet and a rough bottle of rum. A child of 9, bleeding from the thigh, went white in minutes and cold within an hour. Their small feet burned on hot deck planking near the guns. Their eardrums bled from every concussion. Their lungs took in sulfur, saltpeter, and charcoal until they coughed black for weeks after an action. Their rations were cut below the adult share because the quartermaster reasoned a small body needed less. In truth, a growing body needed more, and the powder boys were the first to show scurvy, first to lose teeth, first to sicken when the water casks went foul off the African coast. At night, they slept beside the very guns they served. No cabin, no hammock corner, only cold iron. A blanket if they were lucky, a coil of rope if they were not, pressed against small backs. The boy learned to sleep with one hand on a bucket in case fire broke out in the dark. Yet the darker truth wasn't the danger itself. It was the design that placed him there. The comforting myth says pirates rescued these boys from a crueler world, the workhouse, the orphan yard, or the merchant ship, where a shipmaster might beat a child unconscious for spilling a cup of tea. In some individual cases this was true. Some boys ate better under the black flag than on land. Some found, for the first time, men who spoke to them by name and called them brother. But the pattern across ships and decades tells a colder story. Captains preferred small hands because they cost less. Small hands ate less and could be replaced from any port within a week, easily and without ceremony. A boy's share of a prize was often a quarter of a man's, sometimes an eighth, sometimes nothing. When the articles were signed in the great cabin, the ship's boys were not asked to sign them. They were listed, not consulted. They had no vote in council, no voice to challenge the quartermaster. They could not demand a share of captured cargo. If they died, no widow was owed pension, because the ship's book had no widow to name. The black flag did not shelter the smallest. It flew above them. It did not fly for them. Named cases prove this pattern was no accident. Consider John King. He came aboard the Witta galley in 1716 off the island of Antigua. The Witta was the flagship of Samuel Bellamy, called Black Sam, one of the wealthiest pirates of the age. By passenger Abijah Savage's sworn deposition, John King was no more than 11 years old, possibly 9. His mother was aboard the merchantman Bonetta when Bellamy took her. The boy threatened to kill himself, and to kill his mother if he was not allowed to join the pirates. He signed on. He sailed on. He drowned on. In April 1717, the Witta struck a sandbar off Cape Cod. During a nor'easter, nearly the entire crew perished in the surf. For centuries, the wreck remained legend. Then, in the 1980s, marine archaeologist Barry Clifford located it beneath the sand and cold Atlantic. Among the artifacts, a small leather shoe, a silk stocking, and the fibula of a young child. Forensic analysis dated the bone to a boy between 8 and 11 years of age, matching King. He is, as near as history allows, John King, the youngest confirmed pirate of the Golden Age. His grave was the Atlantic Ocean. His only memorial is a small shoe in a glass museum case. Consider Bartholomew Roberts' crew, called Black Bart, taken by Captain Challoner Ogle off West Africa in 1722. When the survivors were hauled to Cape Coast Castle for trial, court records list boys among the accused. Some were released on account of age. Others, older by a year or two, hanged in chains along shore. A warning to any child who dreamed of the black flag. The court asked how they came aboard. Some answered they were taken from prize ships. Some ran from masters ashore. Some answered nothing at all. Consider the Royal Navy at Trafalgar in 1805, nearly a century after the Golden Age had ended. The muster rolls of British ships of the line list powder boys, aged 8, 9, 10, and older. The roll had not died with the pirates. It had merely put on a uniform of the Crown. The Crown fought Napoleon with children hidden in its magazines, boys handling powder beneath the thunder of guns. The Crown wrote their names in ink so small that later historians would spend whole generations rediscovering them. One battle would show exactly how they died. Imagine a close-quarters engagement in 1718, the Windward Passage. Between Cuba and Hispaniola, a pirate sloop of 10 guns closes silently with a Spanish coastal patrol vessel. The wind is thin, the sea is glass. The two hulls drift together until muzzles almost touch strakes. This is the killing distance. This is where the black flag was earned in blood or buried forever. The order comes. Run out the guns. 10-year-old Tom sprints from the magazine, cartridge clutched to his chest. He knows the seams of the deck under his feet, the count of steps between hatch and carriage. But this time the Spanish gun crew across the water fires first. A long-range shot of packed scrap iron. It tears through the bulwark at chest height, cutting down the loader and the spongeman on the starboard guns. The same iron strikes Tom in the small of the back as he passes, cartridge still clutched to him. The cartridge holds. But a slow match, jarred loose from its tub, rolls to the linen at his feet. A white flash. The powder in his arms ignites, and the trail from the hatch behind him catches fire. For a heartbeat, the deck is a river of fire, following the boy's own path back to the magazine. A quick-witted gunner slams the copper hatch shut and stands on it. The magazine does not go up. But the boy is already ash from ribs to knees. He does not scream. He has no breath left. The captain's log, if it survives, reads a single line. Lost. One boy. Name of Tom. In action. No family named. No age recorded. No burial markers set aboard, ashore, or in any parish register. What remained was sewn into sailcloth with a round shot at the feet and slipped over the rail. The engagement ended within an hour. The prize was 100 barrels of indigo. The crew drank that night. The captain wrote nothing more. Tom's death paid for a legend he would never share. Under the black flag. Why did the maritime powers erase their names? A navy that fought its wars with children could not recruit adults. A merchant company that admitted it insured hulls crewed by orphans could not raise capital in polite drawing rooms. A pirate captain who admitted the black flag flew above expendable boys could not sing himself into immortal ballads. Silence was strategy. Silence remains strategy. The powder boy was not formally abolished until the late 19th century, when steam replaced sail, when smokeless powder replaced black, when public sentiment could not stomach the printed muster rolls. The British Admiralty raised the minimum age gradually. Other fleets followed. By 1900, the child in the magazine was gone. He had not been legislated out of memory. He had simply been forgotten, on purpose. A deliberate erasure. Pop culture rebuilt him. A grinning cabin boy in a striped shirt, perched in the crow's nest, waving a cutlass. He is comic relief in the novels, the plucky orphan in the films, the merchandise on the toy store shelf. But he is not the child kneeling in a copper-lined magazine at dawn, weighing out a charge with shaking hands. He is not the boy on the sandbar off Cape Cod, whose fibula now rests behind museum glass. He is not the ash on the deck planks of a forgotten sloop in the Windward Passage. Remember him. The truth behind the myth of pirate freedom is this. Freedom, when granted, was granted upward, never downward. It went to the man who could vote in council, sign the articles, and claim a share. It did not go to those who could not vote, could not sign, could not claim or walk. Under the black flag, as under every flag of that century, fortune favored the ruthless, never the small. They were the living fuses of the Golden Age. They lit the guns that made the legend. They died before the songs were written, and when the songs came, they did not name them. One more voyage remains beneath the black flag. The captain who traded his own crew for escape. He signed articles of brotherhood at dawn and sold his own brothers by dusk in blood-soaked ports. From Nassau to Madagascar, his name was spoken in every port. His end came quieter than his beginning. If you want to know how he met his end, the next video is already waiting on the channel. Subscribe and raise the black flag with us. There are more stories waiting beneath the waves ahead. Set sail with us aboard the next voyage. The next